stock market in the U.S. has been going up since 2009. That's the longest in American history. Maybe it's going to go on forever. You know, in Washington, they say, don't worry, we're smart people. We've solved the problem. But I know they're not smart people, and I know they add to the problem. So I would imagine that this is starting to come to an end. I have not sold short. I hope I'm preparing that when the time comes, I sell short. I am not good at market timing, so I doubt if I'll get the timing right. Maybe I have to ask you when to start selling short. Now, basically, just everything was going up. There were 7 or 8 stocks that were holy, that always went up. I mean, I've seen this movie before, and when that sort of thing starts happening, all sorts of new people jump into the market and talk about how much fun it is. I mean, as I say, I've been to this rodeo. Doesn't mean I know what I'm doing. Does not mean that at all. I have seen warning signs that worry me, but I am not selling short. All I've done is sell out of the U.S. I've sold Japan too, you know. I still own Uzbekistan. I still own China, but no other stock markets that I can remember. Everybody's happy. And I have learned that when everybody's happy, I should at least ask some questions. That's what I've done. Ask some questions, and my answers were sell. Is the market really that economically sound? Are things okay? And by the way, if you look at the U.S. government debt, this year alone, the numbers are staggering. I don't know how they do it. I don't know why somebody besides me doesn't say, what's going on? How can you do that? I mean, I have young children. I don't know how they're ever going to pay these debts. The U.S. is going to have continuing financial problems. I remember, you know, in 1924, Britain was the richest, most powerful country in the world. But 50 years later, they were bankrupt. I happened to be in England in the 60s, and they were always struggling with what to do and how to pay the bills and what about the currency, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I lived through that transition. I'm afraid we're going to see the same kind of transition in the next maybe 2 or 3 years. The Chinese real estate bubble has popped, and when gigantic bubbles like that pop, it usually takes a long time to recover. China's got time. But other than that, the Chinese economy is starting to recover from what I read and what my friends tell me, but it's still not what it was before. 15 years ago, it was the strongest economy in the world. Now there's debt, and people worried about debt. Some industries are slowing down. Beijing is trying to make the stock market go up, and they're having some success now. I mean, maybe Beijing will do the same thing that the Japanese did and get the market up to new all-time highs. The Japanese market was down for 34 years. That's not a typo. Now it's making all-time highs again because the Bank of Japan has started printing huge amounts of money and buying shares themselves. China's trying to copy Japan to some extent. They're not going as far as Japan is going, but they're trying to get the market up. I hope they do. I don't own any bonds anywhere in the world because I know that inflation is still here and that it's going to rear its head again. You know, markets go up, down, they correct. That's what's happening with the inflation market, if you ask me. I know that interest rates will have to go higher, and then we'll see. If these guys in Washington are usually not very competent, they're bureaucrats. They're not like you and me who understand how the world really works and have to go in there and make decisions to survive. No, they don't do that. They love their government job, but that's not good for you and me. America's gone from a creditor nation to the largest debtor nation in the world, and everybody's singing hallelujah, except the Nobel Prize Committee, which says, no, we don't have to worry. 30 years ago, there were very few international economists on the scene. I mean, if you were from Yale or Princeton or something, people knew you. If you were an economist, if you were from Cambridge, most people probably didn't know you. And so, I mean, all of that is changing, of course, but as is history changing. But 30 years ago, China was a basket case. Now China's the most successful economy in the world. You think they're going to give a prize to China? No. It is history, and it's an end game. They all know each other. They all scratch each other's back. They go to conferences together and talk about how wonderful Princeton is. Well, Princeton is wonderful, but I don't think their economy should rule the world. It is red China, certainly in the American press, but Massachusetts is more communist than China. China, lots of capitalists making gigantic successes in China. Yes, they call themselves communists. Maybe there are a few swearing communists who swear by the Karl Marx. They don't have much influence. Have you heard of Alibaba and Jack Ma? That's an amazing success story in only 25 years. The first Chinese word I learned was mayo. Mayo means, no, we don't have. What are you talking about? You're crazy, never have it. I would say things like, do you have hotels? Mayo. Do you have roads? Mayo. You have restaurants? Mayo. They thought I was nuts, and I was. But that was what China was really like, and I drove across China a few times in my life. But when Mao Zedong died in 1976, one of his lieutenants, Deng Xiaoping, took over, and he was a free market capitalist. He knew that China had to open up and change. It had to encourage the entrepreneurs. They had to trade with the outside world. So he started saying, open up, pay your people more, make more products, trade with the outside world. And they did it. Communist China in those days did what Beijing said. And here was a guy saying, be capitalist, get rich. He said that getting rich is fine. They don't look down on rich people. They admire rich people, just like in the US or Germany or somewhere. Kids who come out of university want to make money. That's their main goal. They don't think about going to Beijing and being communist. They think about how do we succeed. For whatever reason, the world is closing off more and more. After a couple of decades of being open, now they're starting to close, including China, including the US. Protectionism is rising again. I mean, if you look at the Trump people, they're all rabid protectionists. They're all anti-Chinese trade. That has never been a successful ploy to make your country rich. I see signs of what's going on in the 30s, the same, and actually before the first war. You had little wars that people didn't pay much attention to, and you had more little wars. And what happened before was the little wars eventually became big wars. Mankind has had huge wars since the beginning of time. And when they get started, first of all, everybody says, it'll be over in 6 months. The boys will be home by Christmas. We're going to show them. And then a few months later, they're all saying to themselves, how the hell did we get into this war? And the problem is getting out, because once you stirred up capitalism and wild patriotism and passions, it's hard to go down and say, oh, those guys are not so bad after all. Let's have a peace treaty. Let's trade again. Not so easy. I'm not particularly happy about what I just said, but I have to realize what's happening if I want to survive. First thing is, investors should always only invest in what they themselves know a lot about. If you hear a hot tip on Saturday night, ignore them, because it's going to lead to problems. Be prepared for bad times. The world's had bad times in financial markets for hundreds of years. They will come again. I mean, Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary in America, says, don't worry, we've solved the problems. I know they do not have it under control. You go back in history, there have been many successful and powerful countries. Spain, France, etc., etc. It all changed. No country has been on top forever. The Chinese don't seem as exuberant about it as before. Maybe that's because it costs a lot of money. If it continues, it's certainly going to be the most important thing in our lifetime, because it's a gigantic project if they do it. I mean, it's like the railroad. The railroad changed the world in hundreds of ways. One belt, one road will also change the world in hundreds of ways. Get out of globe, see where it's going to go, and get rich. Throughout history, many politicians become nationalistic when there are problems or when they want to think that they're powerful. Canada's a huge place with lots of resources. I mean, the idea that we would take over Canada is a little absurd, if you ask me. That would be a quagmire that would not help the U.S. And likewise, the Panama Canal. Yeah, we built it, we paid for it, but there is a contract, there are treaties. If Trump is going to abrogate the treaties and take over Panama Canal, that means he more or less has to take over Panama. I don't see how that's good for the U.S., except maybe in the short term. And it adds to world tension. Nearly every country in the world goes through the Panama Canal at one time or another. If we have military problems or situations in Panama and in Canada, oh my gosh, Mr. Trump is not going to go down in history as a great president, which he expects to do. If I were buying today, I would be buying silver. Gold is near its all-time high. I own both. Don't worry, and I'm not selling either. Silver's down 50% from its all-time high. Silver has been valuable throughout history. The United States was actually founded on the silver standard. 100 years later, we changed to the gold standard, but silver was the monetary base of the U.S., still is in some parts of East Africa to this day. So I'm not going to buy more gold. I know that. I'm not selling my gold. I have plenty of gold. I'm an old peasant. When things go wrong, you want a little gold in the closet. You want a little silver under the bed. Who knows what's going to happen, but it looks as though, certainly in my children's lifetime, there are going to be dire problems. And I urge everybody to have a little gold and a little silver just in case.